Alright, now the significant difference between lures and baits is this, and it's pretty hard to explain. When you're trolling a bait, whether it's a live bait or a dead bait, quite often the hook is out the front of the fish, like basically with a bridle rig for a livey. You might even skip bait a dead bait, and you've got the hook outside the front of the fish, which means that the full gape of the hook is available to hook the fish. And even if you've got a hook in a bait, the bait crushes, and so you've still got the full gape of the hook to work with. With lures, you don't have that. In the top part of that photo, you can see that the average hook size equals the hook gape equals the diameter of the lure head. That's the absolute minimum. But what you don't really realise is that when you do that, the lure leader hole comes out the middle of the head, so you've effectively only got 50% of that hook gape to work with, because that lure head isn't going to crush. So that rule of the hook going around the lure head, and that's the size of the hook, that's the absolute minimum size. Most of the guys who have the highest success rate go up 1 or 2 sizes. Do you guys understand what I mean about the gape and the head and all that sort of stuff? Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, you may think that's a really big hook. And it is. It's a monster hook, isn't it? We'll go to the larger screen. Okay, so that's a big hook, as you can see. But when you're using a lure that big, and you think that's a big lure, but it's only the size of a striped tuna. In fact, a small striped tuna. So it's not that big a lure. But when you look at the actual hook that you've got available to use, let's get that set up there. You can see I've only got half that hook to use, so I've actually only got the equivalent of a bait hook of a 10-0 or 11-0 in a lure that big if you use a hook that big. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. In the small tackle lures, for example, this is the little blacks, which you probably aren't that interested in because they don't come that far south. That's an Uzi. It's probably the best little black marlin lure we make. It's also great for school tuna. Now, if we were going to use a hook by the normal regular method, it would probably be a 4-0 hook. But once again, a 4-0 hook is not big enough to get around the jawbone, even of a juvenile back. So the most common size hook we use for that lure is a size 25. That's a 10mm head, so we've actually got 15mm of hook gape available to hook the fish. Okay? And that would be the minimum size hook I would use for that lure to target things like school tuna or small black marlin or sailfish and things like that. Right, does that sort of make more sense? And we still use that hook on lures up to cockroach size, which you might be more familiar with. This is sort of getting more to the size of the lures that you're probably used to seeing in the bluefin grounds and the marlin grounds, which is a cockroach. So once again, that hook goes over that lure head. So that's a minimum size, and that's the size we still use for those because we've still got enough of a gape to go around a marlin jaw. But personally, I actually use a hook at least a size bigger, even for little blacks, because big fish do eat little lures and I want to catch them. So I would tend to use a hook, not quite that big. Okay, so I actually use a size 30 hook on that lure, which gives me a much more solid hook to get around the jawbone. Okay, now a lot of people go to smaller hooks, which is really wrong, and the reason they do that is because they simply don't have the gear set up to sink a hook that big. For example, we make light gauge hooks and heavy gauge hooks. These are both heavy gauge hooks. To sink these, they both need, well, that one needs 5 kilos of drag to sink it on strike, and the size 30 needs about 5 kilos to sink it on strike. On 15 kilo, you've got 5 kilos, but we certainly don't back off from that.